and cruises. Spanish institutions such as schools, missions, etc. could not be really developed as centers for studies. It was impossible to conduct an empirical study of Muslim culture, tradition, ethnology, history, and society, since the Spaniards and Christians were not received well in Muslim societies. The biased preconception of Spanish society is so far as Islam and its followers were concerned, prevented Spanish scholarship from developing empirical lines. Therefore, Spanish literature on Muslims was mainly based on Spanish perception of situations or realities in Muslims.
Filipino literature of the Muslim did not depart from Hispanic American pattern and heritage. Since there is a correlation between literature and the kind of orientation people tend to develop, the Christian Filipinos, being influenced and educated in the colonial tradition, has acquired and even maintained a colonial bias against Muslim history and culture. The expression, "a good Moro is a dead Moro," was a popular concept back then and had become an important ingredient in Filipino literature. There were, however, a few exceptions where Muslims have been given unbiased treatments, such as in El Renacimiento, which was one of the sources to call Zakaria a patriot. But as time goes on, Filipino writers still remain believing in the idea that Muslims are uncivilized and warlike. Thus, for these reasons, they are ought to be Christianized and integrated. Any official reports on Muslim affairs and conflicts are always filled with suspicions and mistrust by their individuals like Jofisto Gingona, who had a different point of view regarding Muslim affairs. This is probably because he served various administrative positions in Mindanao. Another individual with the name of George Pacobo, president of the University of the Philippines, believed that in teaching Muslims their own culture and tradition. However, persistent colonial influence in the country prevented meaningful changes in the direction of Filipino literature on the Muslims. The change came only in 1950s when unity and integrations of what official sources called the cultural minorities were strongly felt. The Kamlun uprising in Sulu, which lasted from 1952 to 1954, paved way for Filipino writers and analysts to look deeper into Muslim history and culture. Writers and journalists such as Rodriguez and Filimon Tutay, among others, represented the efforts of journalists to go beyond the army reports. Muslim literature, excluding the Hunter and Tarsilas, which are loyal annals and genealogy records, appeared about the 1950s, apparently to offset the great amount of anti-Muslim literature. Ibrahim Hubaira is nationally recognized for his short stories and essays that depicted the Muslim culture and heritage. Later contributions to the Muslim literature come from a few rising and concerned scholars and academicians. Saber on Maranao social problems. Second is Imaw on Sulu art. Third is Santanina Rasul on Sulu education. Fourth, Baradas on Maranao customary law. Fifth is Madali on Maranao literature. Sixth is Mustara on Islamic law. Seventh is Ikali Hainal on Sulu kinship. Eighth is Kasman and Badjaw, House of Rituals. Ninth is Glam on Muslim political problems. And then Hainal Rasul on Muslim identity and law. Perhaps more influence has been the works of Cesar Majun, particularly his work Muslim in the Philippines and his essays on the Sultanate and national integration. That's all.
But serious efforts are yet to be seen in the collection of the oral literature of the Mindanao. The Yakans, the Samals, and the other non-Christian groups. Still undone is a credible interpretation of the folklore materials already collected. and until a reasonable body of oral literature is developed, the reconstruction of Muslim prehistory remains anchored on the fragile structure of pure historical sources, which are plagued by colonial limitations and biases. The second area is archaeology. This far, a modest beginning has been attempted by American scholars in Zamboanga and Sulu, but similar undertakings are yet to be seen in all the Muslim areas. This done, the reconstitution of Muslim pre-Hispanic artistic tradition remains completely dependent on the contemporary survivals of indigenous arts, which has been affected by time and change. The third area is the theoretical framework of Muslim studies. There is something common in all literatures thus far produced by Muslims and non-Muslims, colonial and non-colonial Muslims, pro and anti-Muslims. This approach is based on the assumption that there is only one Muslim history, one people, one culture, and one problem.
Go.
The effect of this unitarism has been clearly portrayed in the development and persistence of colonial policies and programs. The government applied one policy to all Muslim problems. It assumed that an individual, leader, or a group of Muslims could represent the entire Muslim people in the Philippines, and that by the dealing with such individual or group, the problems in Muslim societies would be solved. That this unitary approach is unrealistic, inappropriate, and ineffective may be seen from at least two perspectives. One is culturally, the Muslim people are divided at least into 6 ethno-linguistic groups, whose languages are mutually unintelligible and exclusive. The Lanao Muslims speaks Maranao, those of Cotabato, the Maguindanao, those of Sulu, the Tauso, and Samal. Those of Basilan, the Yakan, and those of Zamboanga is a mixture of Tauso, Samal, and Bangingi. Number 2 is historically. The Muslim people have never shared a truly meaningful way of a common historical experience, except in terms of the fact that they are all Muslims and they fought all the colonial powers, just as did the other Christian Filipinos.